Thank you both for coming in. Columbian is pleased to welcome candidates for county treasurer. And I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor, and I believe you met the other members of the editorial board. Just so you know, reporter Jake Thomas is sitting in on this meeting. He won't be asking questions here, but might want to speak to you afterwards. We are videotaping this. We will post it unedited on our website for the benefit of our readers. And I should mention before we get started that you are running for county treasurer to replace Doug Lasher, who is retiring after 8 terms. So it's an open seat. So hopefully we can have a robust discussion and go from there. We'll start with, take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourselves, explain why you are running for this position, and then we'll get on to some specific questions following that. And we'll start with Alishia.
Okay, thank you. Alishia Topper, running for treasurer, as you mentioned. I'm a native to the Pacific Northwest, as you know. Grew up in North Clark County, attended Battleground High School. Actually graduated and earned an athletic scholarship to compete for Washington State University, where I ran track and field. Graduated with 2 undergraduate degrees, so I have a bachelor's of psychology and a bachelor's in foreign language and literatures. Had an opportunity to study abroad while I was in college as well. And graduated from Washington State and came back home to Battleground at the time, and just got my career start working for nonprofits. I have a passion, as you probably know from my work on the Vancouver City Council, around homelessness and affordable housing. But I went back to get my master's degree at Portland State. I kind of felt that my career path needed a little bit more education, so I got a master's degree in public administration from Portland State. I did work for the university for a while, and then came back to Clark County. And my master's degree was really kind of the sparking point to wanting to get into public administration and local government, which led me to the 2013 election, where I became a Vancouver City Council. And I've served for 5 years. I'm currently in my 2nd term. I work full-time for Clark County in the tax services office, and I really enjoy that work. I oversee the billing and collection of all of the property tax and assessments for Clark County, which is over 148,000 parcels. I'm also chair of Columbia Credit Union. I've been on that board since 2012, and this last year was elected to lead our credit union. The other thing that I'm really honored to say is in 2017 I was appointed by Governor Inslee and unanimously confirmed by the State Senate to serve on the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, where we help award the low-income housing tax credits throughout the state, which are federal credits, and we also provide bond financing to nonprofits for facility construction. So I'm very well-rounded in my professional and my educational experience, and feel like I'm perfectly poised and positioned and experienced to be Clark County's next treasurer.
Great, thank you. Robert?
Okay, well, I'll start with the biographical information because that seems to be what candidates typically do here. I'm a longtime resident of the Pacific Northwest. Shortly after I was born, my father was drafted. This was during the Vietnam War. He was stationed in Okinawa. He was Army medical. After he resigned his commission as a captain, we settled in Southern Oregon. And so I grew up in small towns and in the country of Southern Oregon. I eventually went to the University of Oregon. I got accepted to the College of Business there. At the time, it was about a 50% acceptance rate because of the higher math requirements. So I majored in finance and I got a minor in economics. I also attended the College of Arts and Sciences, and I got a degree in psychology when I was there. I've noticed in interviews that Alishia has done in the past that she talks about some of the challenges that she faced as she was growing up and have shaped her life. So I'll say briefly that I lost my father at a young age, and that put a lot of responsibility on me. And that was right before I went back to college and at the age of about 23. And the other thing that happened was I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 2, as a senior at the University of Oregon. And my oncologist staff encouraged me to drop out of school and get treatment and face all of that, but I decided to stay in school, so I remained a full-time student even as I was battling cancer. And that was a big change in my life because I was planning to study abroad and travel and do a lot of things like that, and suddenly I was fighting for my life, literally. When I was done, I had picked myself up, brushed myself off, and I got back on the recruiting trail. And I was recruited by Toyota. So at the time, these were the days of the Silicon Valley gold rush. And their Newman facility was having a hard time recruiting from their traditional grounds of Berkeley and Stanford and so forth. So they looked at programs that had the requirements of people that they needed. They looked at University of Colorado and University of Oregon. Long story short, I went through a very rigorous recruiting process. I was one of 2 candidates out of 60 recruited from those 2 schools to join Toyota. Shortly after I got there at the Newman plant down in Fremont, California, I moved into a senior role as the financial analyst for the Toyota Corolla line of cars. That is a $3.5 billion product. If you're familiar with Toyota, it's famous for running very lean, and you take on very longitudinal roles. So I was responsible for the revenue accounting, I was responsible for the finance bill of materials, I was responsible for the product financial statements, I was responsible for regulatory reporting like the American Automobile Labeling Act, the Corporate Average Fuel Economy Act. So a number of things, and I was also trained in their world famous total quality management system. So what American companies call Six Sigma is kind of the equivalent of what a black belt would be in that organization. All of this made me very valuable, and so I was recruited by one of the high-flying .com companies at the time. It was Excite at Home. At the time, they were the leader in broadband. AT&T had just purchased a controlling interest of that company. I went over there and thought I was going to get rich very young with all my stock options. And then the .com bubble burst. So suddenly I was back to the old drawing board, and I wanted to return to the Pacific Northwest. So I was recruited by Freightliner when it was part of the larger Daimler Chrysler organization. I joined their corporate audit group. I did internal operation audits. I flew all over North America doing reviews of manufacturing plants, distribution centers, and corporate programs like their logistics function, purchasing, etc. After Daimler, I briefly spent some time with a startup company, did some international travel and experience from that, and then also, after that, I came up here and I worked for Nautilus, which was also in a bit of a turnaround situation. So I joined the direct leadership team as the finance business partner. I had a dotted line to the man who's currently the chief operating officer of that company, and later reported directly to the vice president general manager of the direct business. In that role, I also took on responsibility for the P&L, so I was responsible for the income statement. I was responsible for a lot of the external reporting, the management discussion and analysis in the MD and the SEC reports. I was responsible for the consumer finance programs, so all of our relationships with HSBC Bank, GE Capital, Genesis Capital, Desjardins Bank in Canada, a number of financial institutions. About this time, I returned and finished my master's degree. I'd spent about a year in graduate school in the Bay Area and wanted to finish that, so I liked the program at Washington State University here in Vancouver, so I got my MBA there. I graduated at the top, or very near the top of the class, with a 3.94 GPA, and I started looking for new opportunities, and that's when I joined HP. So I'm now a member of HP's Market Analysis and Planning Group. That is part of their global strategy group. My peers, many of them are top 50 MBAs. They come from top consulting backgrounds, they have PhDs and so forth. So it's great to be working with such a bright group and such a historic technology firm. The other thing I'll just close on here is that after I came across the river several years ago, I had a lifelong interest in history, and I purchased an old house in Portland and went through the whole process of fixing that up, getting it listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I did all of that work my own. on my own, got really networked into the historic preservation community in Portland. So I came up here, there was an opportunity to join the Historic Preservation Commission. I introduced myself, told them what I know and why I'd be interested in that role. And shortly after I did, I joined at the same time as Sarah Fox, City Council candidate. And then a year later, the entire commission turned over. So she and I took that over. I spent the next 4 years as chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. And Sarah and I both wanted to take that commission and do more with it in terms of public outreach and being more activists in preserving our historic assets. So we did that. We recently won an award at the state level for outreach and education in historic preservation. And we also manage some very controversial cases around historic preservation, which you've covered in the Columbian in the last couple of years. And we've received a lot of kudos for that as well, particularly at the National Association of Preservation Conferences in Des Moines, Iowa earlier this year.
Thank you. Just really quick, given that background, why are you interested in treasury?
So as a result of my time on the Historic Preservation Commission and some of the cases that we've had to deal with over the last couple of years, I've had a lot of people approach me and say, hey, have you ever thought about running for public office? And I was encouraged to look at city council, for example, and I looked at a number of these things and they weren't really interesting to me. But I always looked at the treasurer's office and I said, well, that's right up my alley. I mean, that's right in line with my experience. And if that ever opens up, but I didn't think it would. I think like most people, I thought Doug Lasher was probably going to stay in that role until, he was 72 or something like that. But he did retire. His filing deadline about noon. I had to run into the office. I had a meeting to go to. So I couldn't really watch to see if anybody was going to file. And I just said, okay, I'm in. So I filed and, I look forward to it. I know I'm a dark horse in this race, but I think I'm highly qualified to serve, and I'm in it and giving it my best shot.
Have you run for office before?
I ran for office once for mayor of Portland in 2004, but a little bit about that. Now, there's a difference between running for office to win an elected office and filing for office and becoming a candidate to bring attention to a cause that you really care about. Now, this was 2004. It was the lead up to the war in Iraq and, the authorization for force that has somehow turned into this 14-year never-ending war in the Middle East. I was very passionate about that. My father was in the military. He was medical. He served in the VA administration for most of his career. I've seen what that does, and I just thought that the rush to war was very premature and ill thought at the time. So I was very passionate about that, and that was a way of bringing attention to a cause that affected a lot of people that were close to me.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with, I think, to a lot of people, a lot of voters might have difficulty figuring out what the treasurer's office does and what impact it can have on the community. So tell me, how can the treasurer position address local social issues? For example, affordable housing, which is something, it's been a big topic in the community. Alishia, what do you see as the role of the treasurer?
Well, the role of treasurer really is an administrative position, so they're not necessarily setting policy like a state legislator or a city council member. Really, the role that the treasurer could play, which they currently are implementing the laws that are set forth by the state, and they are able to identify, for example, tax title properties that are maybe coming up after a foreclosure and now are owned by the county. There are statutes that would allow local cities to have priority preference, almost like a first right of refusal for those lands to turn them into affordable housing. So having a treasurer that understands your state statutes, understands the RCWs, that's tracking what's being passed out of Olympia is important, because that person would be able to help deploy and ensure that all of the local cities, and including the county, would know what their options are and to be able to be an advocate for that. But in terms of local work on affordable housing, other than being a voice, there wouldn't be a large part.
Robert, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think everything that Alishia just said is accurate. I think that historically, the Clark County Treasurer's Office has been more of an administrative one. And I think that Alishia is, a very capable candidate of handling that. But I also think that there is a financial role and an oversight role there that the office could become stronger at. And that's where I think my background kind of better fits.
How would you implement that? How can the treasurer play more of a financial role?
Well, I think one of the things that you can do is you can enhance the financial analytics that the treasurer's office does. So I've looked at the quarterly reports that the treasurer's office produces. There's nothing wrong with them. I think that they could be better. I think that there's room for improvement. And I think another thing is that when you have more of a administrative bureaucratic leadership in these offices, then a lot of what you get is this work with consultants and outside agencies. And if you don't have a really strong background in finance and information systems and some of these things, then you're more dependent on what consultants are telling you. Whereas if you do have a lot of personal experience, then you're better capable of vetting some of that information. Because we've all read stories about how some municipality somewhere in the country was approached by and offered some aggressive fund or something like that. They got sold on it, and then they end up in trouble financially.
Alishia, would you agree with that? Is that a concern?
No, I believe that the treasurer's office has a very competent and capable staff. We have 2 CPAs on staff, a half-time certified financial planner who does all of our active trading from Bloomberg. We are a dynamic office, and yes, there are 4 main functions: billing and collection of taxes, managing debt. We also are involved in investments. And it's important that the treasurer knows how to hire the right people for that work. So we work very closely with the budget office, and our finance director for our office is the previous director of the budget for Clark County. So she's run Clark County finances. She's incredibly competent and capable. She's a PhD, and that's who you should look to make sure that we have good oversight. We do have contracts with consultants. Obviously, we have the largest banking contract in Clark County since we are the bank of the county. We manage all of the funds on behalf of every school district. We also are involved with setting up banking functions for ESD 112, Southwest Clean Air. In whole, we have 42 taxing districts. So yes, consultants are important, and the specific report that my opponent's referring to has to do with our investment pool. So we have quarterly meetings, which are not required by law, but we do it because we believe in transparency and accessibility for all of our districts that we're investing on their behalf. And we used to have a very detailed, thick report that we would give out in paper form and post online. And we sent out a survey because we felt like people were just kind of blindly thumbing through it. And so we asked, well, what would you like to see? What kind of information? How would you like it to be presented? And so we took their feedback and we created what is now posted on the website, which is more of a higher level synopsis of what's happening nationally and globally in the market. We also take a look at what's happening within our pool, what categories we're investing in and why. Always looking out for safety first, making sure that we have adequate liquidity, because as the bank, we need to make sure we can meet payroll for all the school districts in the county. And then, of course, we're looking at yield, but yield always is going to be the last thing that we look at after safety and liquidity. So I think our reports, everything can always be enhanced or improved upon, and that will be something I will do if elected. I'll make sure we are evaluating what our districts and what our customers and what the citizens want to see, and then tailoring our communications to meet those desires and those requests.
Robert, would you approach the county's investments differently? Should they be getting a higher yield, or?
I think, first of all, let me just say that I think Doug Lasher has served the community admirably. I don't take issue with anything he's done, so when I say there's room for improvement, that's just because I think it's natural to seek outside talent, and I mean, In academia, you seek graduates, PhD students from other institutions to improve what you're doing in your own. In the corporate world, it's the same way. You seek to bring talent from other organizations. I think that's healthy in the public sector as well. I think that's a good argument to make for having people come from the private sector and have opportunities to move into public service. In terms of the specific investments, I would look at it. I understand that for the most part we run, or the Treasury runs a net asset value type of portfolio, so it is low risk. Now you're managing cash flow, so you're managing receipts and revenues and getting them out to the agencies and the places in the community that need that. When you are doing that, you have a responsibility to ensure liquidity and ensure security. So I don't take issue with that. Are there opportunities? I think that if I were inside and had an opportunity to analyze things, there might be a little bit of room to get a slightly higher return. I think there's 400 some funds or something that they manage. Just because if you look at from the end of the last recession to now, with the quantitative easing that the Fed has been going through, the S&P has gone up 300% since that time. So in a bull market, there's lots of opportunity to kind of get a little bit higher return, even if it's 0.5% or something. But in general, I don't disagree with the philosophy that Doug Lasher has had in terms of managing cash.
Now, Alishia, you've been in the office for a while, in the treasurer's office. What would you do differently? Where is there room for improvement?
Well, I think there's room for improvement in 3 core areas. I do believe Doug has done a tremendous job. He's been very innovative for a treasurer's office across the state, working in Olympia to get tax code changed, so he has more flexibility to implement efficiencies. But I think that one area is being able to take feedback from customers and help that inform how we're operating. Our joint lobby, which is the treasurer, assessor, and auditor's office, we have cross-trained staff that are able to serve the citizens, which we're the only county in the state that currently has that model. And Greg Kimsey and Doug went to Olympia to change the law so we could do that. And the customer service, we see 35,000 people that come to our office annually. That is a big base of people that are experiencing customer service or a lack thereof, and I want to be able to capture their feedback. In addition, we field over 18,000 phone calls, and I want to be able to implement technology that will provide people an opportunity to give us feedback if it was too cumbersome to get answers from any of the offices. Did they get their answer actually that they needed or not? I mean, those are things I think when people think about government, they can say, oh, government is slow or inefficient or this. Well, if we can make improvements based on feedback, that's huge. The other, I want to make sure that we're tackling our mobile home issue, and I know this is something that gets down into the weeds, but we have about 450 mobile homes that are currently delinquent that we have not gone through distraint. And it goes back, I think, to 1994. And the reason is because the cost to do distraint on mobile homes that should be facing foreclosure, it's too costly. Where are you going to store them? You have to hire a company to move them. So I want to make sure that I'm working with other state treasurers and our local electeds to get the laws changed to make mobile homes more efficient and effective, because it's costing us a lot of money as a county. And so that's another area that I think Doug, didn't really have time to focus on, but I want to put a task force within our office to really start working on those. I also think the way that we handle business personal property through collection could be improved. So the assessor's office is responsible for being the facilitator for all business personal property, but when those accounts become default or they're not paying, then our staff at the treasurer's office is responsible for actually going out and doing distraint on those assets. And there's a lot of improvement that we can have in that office area as well. So my focuses are going to be bigger picture, feedback from customers. How can we be better focused? How can we improve functionality through some of our mobile home program, business personal property, and then of course just being accurate and efficient and making sure that we're following all of the best practices for financial management. Because government accounting is completely different than the private sector. We have different policies and different rules that govern our work, and so I think that's a focus area that I will definitely be putting energy into.
I'm curious, Robert, when she says government accounting is different from the private sector. Is that accurate? Do you see any differences? Would you be comfortable with those differences?
Oh yeah, public sector accounting is completely different than private sector accounting. There are a lot of differences. But I work with the Historic Preservation Commission. We're one of the few advisory commissions that actually has a budget. We also administer the historical grants program. So I interact with the budgets in that regard, the county budgets. And also I have a complete major in finance. And so when you major in discipline, you get a very, very broad introduction to that. So I studied public sector accounting as part of that. It's part of my background. And then I mentioned some of the government reporting that I had to do as part of the automobile industry, and also doing SEC reporting. So I've had a lot of exposure to that as well. I would also say that I'm not a CPA, but I do have a strong background in tax. So as throughout my academic career, I think I've taken 2 semesters of graduate level tax, as well as business law, additional coursework in business law. So I have a pretty strong background in that.
And do you see any other shortcomings in the treasurer's office that maybe Alishia didn't mention? Anything come to mind?
Well, it's hard to say because I'm not working in the treasurer's office, and it's funny because HP wants my mind to be very focused on HP all the time, and so I do that 50, 60 hours a week. What I will say is this, there's a Japanese word that applies to total quality management, and that word is nimawashi. Translated, what that means is transplanting the roots. And the idea is that if you wish for a plant to flourish and a garden to grow, then you have to take care of the roots, and there's a process that you go through for moving things. So I've heard other candidates who've been elected in the past come in and say they're going to make all these drastic changes. I think Jacob in the recent feature he wrote said that I was being oblique about what I want to do. As treasurer, I don't think I'm being oblique. I think it's just good management, that you go in there, you manage as is, you take the time to learn about the issue, and then you start implementing improvements. So you build consensus before you start making those changes.
Are the technology safeguards in the treasurer's office adequate? And how do you ensure that they continue to be adequate in this world of cybercrime? So, Robert, you want to start?
Sure. So cybercrime right now, I think, costs the global economy, it's up over, it's multi-trillions. I have seen some research. I can't talk to the specifics of that because it's property of HP. But it's growing and it's a big concern. I read something recently that it's costing financial institutions on average about $20 million a year. That's on average across financial institutions. So it's a growing concern. And then when you think about kind of the wave of technology that we are on now, if you think of your classic product life cycle, apply that to your technology life cycle, and where we are with the advent of things like augmented reality, 5G technology, blockchain, digital ledger technology. All of this is in its infancy, and companies are building out for that right now and investing a lot of money. As this happens, it creates opportunities, but it also creates risks. And this is an example where you can rely on consultants, you can rely on your IT department to handle all of that. But if you have somebody who has a strong background in technology, in finance, and can apply that as you're dealing with these types of issues and preparing the security of the Treasury, then you can be better prepared and more effective at managing those challenges.
Alishia, do you have a response?
Yes, so the Treasurer's Office is under the purview of the Clark County IT office, so we don't have our own IT people. The security is a huge priority for the county, and we ensure that all of the systems that we use are up to date and compliant, have the strongest firewalls. Anytime we do file imports or exports from any of our external vendors, especially for online payments, we work with merchant service companies. All of them have to be PCI compliant. We're using the best FSTP sites to make sure that all that data is going to be safe and secure. So I would say that yes, there are always going to be emerging technologies, but I do not see that the Clark County Treasurer's Office is going to be a leader in helping to implement blockchain. I think that that's something that the banking institutions will bring to us when it's been vetted out. I mean, the federal government hasn't even had a chance to really wrap its brains around that technology. So yes, it's coming. I think you keep your eye on it, but to shift focus and try to become a leader in technology within Treasury, I think would be a waste of resources. I think we need to be really good at what we do. And, you know, on the banking side, we see over it's amazing. It's $7 billion a year, 3.5 billion in and 3.5 billion out. That's a lot of transactions. So to understand that every vendor that you work with, and our bank is right now Bank of America, I can guarantee you they have full-time people, an entire team that's working on security of those funds. And we're going to make sure that we're holding them accountable to ensure our funds are also being secured. So yes, technology is important. I'm not going to replace the people at our desk with robots. You know, AI technology is coming. The fast food restaurants are happy to do that, but for now we're going to have people taking questions and payments.
To be very clear, I'm not suggesting that Clark County Treasury become a leader in blockchain or any of these new technologies. That's not what I said. What I said is that these transformations are occurring in the economy, that we need to manage through them, as Alishia just described. What I am suggesting is that I have a stronger background in the tech field and maybe more insights into some of the opportunities and threats that are associated with some of these emerging technologies.
And really the threats in the office have more to do with phishing scams, making sure your employees are educated not to click through links. That's how data is breached. And we have a very strong program that ensures that we are isolating any of those threats. IT then is able to deconstruct them and make sure that no one else is clicking through.
Does the treasurer ever shop the account occasionally?
Yeah.
And how does that process work? And
Yeah.
is it working well? I mean, how long has Bank of America had that?
Well, Bank of America right now is on a 2-year contract, so we will be going out for full banking RFP.
Okay.
We would have gone out in 2019, but the county is replacing its current financial system, which currently is Oracle, and we're moving to Workday. So to do an RFP with brand new banking, a potential new bank, we would not want to do it at the same time we're restructuring our entire chart of accounts. So we're going to be going out in 2020.
Robert, any comments on that process?
I think it is good to go out with RFPs periodically. I think it is good to look at different financial institutions. Obviously, B of A is a very large institution, and you can be certain that they have a lot of security measures in place and a lot of financial products to choose from. But I think that's a healthy process to go through, and I feel comfortable managing through those types of transitions as well.
Robert, how many employees does the treasurer's office have?
I believe it's about 25.
Okay. Alishia, does that sound right?
24 and a quarter.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
Thank you.
Now, Alishia, if you win this election, would you remain on the city council? How does this work?
No, so I would resign my
Okay.
seat effective on December 31st, 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, and whether it's required that you can't hold 2 elected
Yeah.
offices, but even if that wasn't a requirement, I would still resign my seat. I believe that the treasurer's office is a full-time job, and it needs someone with a full-time
Sure.
commitment and focus.
But that is a requirement, you
It
say?
is a requirement, yes, and a good requirement.
What do you, Robert? What's your plan?
Oh, I was thinking I would keep my full-time job at HP. I would work 24 hours a day. I would drink lots of coffee. and
There's lots of
do-
places for coffee in town.
Yeah, and pad my retirement. No, I couldn't do that, and it wouldn't be compliant with HP policy anyway. If I were to get this opportunity, I understand I'm a dark horse in the race. I understand that Alishia has much more visibility within the community, but you know, I'm certainly up for the challenge. And if I were to get the opportunity, then I would resign from HP, and I would move into the role of Clark County Treasurer and embrace that enthusiastically.
And one thing, the paper did a story, I think, before the primary, and it indicated that you didn't have a really strong record of voting in the county. I think you had voted 3 times in the past 5 years. Is that a concern for a candidate? Should voters worry about that, or do you feel like you're engaged in the process?
Yeah, who did that story? Was that Jacob who covered that one?
I honestly don't
I think it was
know.
Jacob the intern. That's what you have interns do on election years, is to do that story.
Oh, okay. So no, because I'm very active in the issues. Obviously, I volunteer my time with the Historic Preservation Commission, so I closely monitor what's going on. I read the Columbian. I'm sorry, I'm not a subscriber, but I do pay attention to what's going on, and I vote when there's issues that are really important to me. Sometimes it just gets away from me. I mean to vote, and I don't end up sending it in. I guess I'm somewhat remiss in that respect, but I participate and I do pay attention to the issues, so I don't feel like that's an indicator of lack of concern or lack of engagement with the community on my part.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Well, then we'll move on. Give us your final pitch to voters, why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements that you like. And we'll start with Robert.
Okay, so in terms of endorsements, it's interesting because when you run against a sitting city councilwoman and very established politician, you find that a lot of doors are closed to you and people aren't even going to talk to you about it. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. The Clark County Republicans decided that they didn't want to take a position on any of the nonpartisan candidates. That's been a little bit of a challenge. But I do have the support of some of the Republican precinct committee officers, so Marlene Adams being one. Ann Donnelly has recommended me. I have the support of Andrew Gregg, who's former chair of the Arts Commission, retired school principal here in Clark County, and previously he was chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. So some people who felt comfortable stepping forward on that. I do believe that moderate voters and Republican conservative voters probably would feel more comfortable with me in the office. We both declared nonpartisan, but Alishia has been a Democratic candidate. I know from talking to many conservative voters that they definitely identify with her being a Democratic candidate with, kind of very left liberal ideals. So I think that I can definitely represent the Treasurer's Office from the middle more effectively. And I've made it a point to say that I don't want to get involved in lobbying or taking positions on issues, because as soon as you do that, it becomes partisan, right? And if you really believe this is a nonpartisan role, then I think that you need to steer clear of that. And certainly if you read the research and you read up on stakeholder management, which I've done a lot of academic work on, you find that if you are going to maintain process fairness and maintain interference of objectivity, it's very important that you don't kind of take sides, even on small issues. So maintaining objectivity is a good reason why I think I can better serve the majority of voters. I would also say that if you look at Alishia's voter's guide information and her work experience, she lists being a member of a lot of associations, professional associations, being a member of a lot of committees, but that's not full-time work experience. Okay, let's just be honest about this. Being a notary public is not a full-time work experience. So prior to the only full-time work experience that I can see on her background that's finance related is the time that she spent over the last year and a half in the Treasurer's office, working there. And I think if you compare that year and a half of professional experience to my 20 plus years of professional experience with some of the world's leading companies, I very clearly have a much stronger finance background to offer. I do want to say that, I voted for Alishia back in 2013. I think she served on city council very well. I was a little bit disheartened with the feature that you ran on the treasurer's race just last week or so, because it made it seem much more partisan. I thought I was very complimentary of Alishia at the time and the work that she's done. She's a Cougar, so we've both got that on our side, Washington State Cougar. But I do think that if you look at the imbalance in experience that you bring to the table, and kind of my academic discipline being formerly in finance, and then just the fact that in the time that I've been on the Historic Preservation Commission, we have had to deal with some pretty major cases of stakeholder management and some of those things that have gripped the community, and I think that I managed to do that very effectively. So I feel comfortable stepping into more of a public role and leading the Office of Treasury.
Great, thank you. Alishia?
Thank you. The administrative offices of the county are incredibly important positions. It isn't just a want to have a whim to get into elected office, and so I'm just going to run for whatever seat I think is open. It really takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of knowledge about the functions of the office. And I feel as though I am the most qualified with the best experience to be treasurer because I have worked in the office. I understand exactly what the functions of the treasurer is. I understand the laws that are leading and dictating our work. And I believe that all of those offices should be nonpartisan. I don't believe politics should be a part of that daily work. And I have not sought a single party endorsement in this race, and I have been a nonpartisan elected official for the last 5 years. My opponent, on the other hand, just gave you an example of how he pursued a partisan endorsement, whereas in his voter statement, he specifically calls out no politician or no politics. I'm sure you have it in front of you, but I'm not making this a partisan seat. I'm sorry, but my opponent is trying to do that. Secondly, I do believe that it's important that if you want to run for an office, that you learn about it. When I decided to run for city council, I met with the city manager, I met with the elected officials, I met with community leaders who've been involved with the city. I got to know the job before I decided I was going to apply. Well, my opponent never took the opportunity to meet with our current treasurer of 34 years, who happened to be acknowledged as the National Treasurer of the Year. If you wanted to run for that office, you would think you would take the time to learn about the work that you would be doing, in addition to touring and even seeing what the office and the functions and what the staff were like. So that's another thing that I have put in a lot of effort to truly understand the office and to make sure it was a job that I would be successful at and that I would be able to grow the office and take it to the next step, because we are a leader in treasury management in this state, and other treasurer's offices look to us for best practices. We're giving tours tomorrow to Benton County, for example, and so I want to continue that legacy. I think another important thing to note is that voting records do count. To be an individual that will help determine the leaders who are going to be setting policies for your city, for your state, for your country is incredibly important, and you need to be an active participant. And I personally don't want an elected leader that doesn't have a near perfect voting record. There are reasons that you may miss a vote, but it should be a top priority always. The last thing, and I'm sorry, I do appreciate your service on the Historic Preservation Commission, but it's a lot different being on a commission than running an office that has almost $1 billion in an investment pool, who sees over $3 billion in transactions annually in banking, that has over $767 million of property taxes and collections. That is real work. And being on a commission is an elected experience, as presented in your voters pamphlet. And I think you ran for Portland office twice, mayor and city council. So
No, I dread that almost immediately.
you still filed.
The second time.
You still filed for office. So I think that the honesty is an important quality in any elected official. And I have proven, and the reason that I have strong endorsements is because I've proven that I am an honest, credible person that people can count on. and I'm very visible, and I've always operated in a transparent manner. So I am proud of my background. I'm proud of the experience, and I would be honored to be treasurer. I know it's not as high profile of a position as some folks think, but to me it is very high profile and it is very important work, and we need the right person in the job. Lastly, I would say that I will, if elected, be in Olympia to work on tax code changes. That is a part of the job. It isn't lobbying. We would not have an investment pool in Clark County, a local government investment pool, if Doug Lasher had not gone to Olympia to change the law. We would not have e-read filings. You would have to come down with paper forms. All of the title companies that go through my department have to file electronically, and it's efficient and it's effective government, and that's because we changed the law. Online payments, because we went to Olympia and changed the law. Our joint lobby, we broke down the barriers and the silos of 3 offices so you could come and pay your excise tax and record your deed all in one transaction with one office, because we went to Olympia and changed the law. Payment plans. If you want to make payment plans, you can do that now on taxes because we went to Olympia and changed the laws. So there it goes on and on. Electronic bill presentment, electronic warrant registers, lost warrant process update. All of these are because a treasurer was willing to go to Olympia, educate those that were making laws, and get changes so we could operate more efficiently here locally. And I will continue to do that, and I'm proud to say that I will do that. You know, I'm very passionate about this race, and I'm just now getting to know my opponent because I had not known him previously. And so I would say I'm so glad that other people decided to step up and run. But regardless, I am the most qualified candidate. I will do the best job on day one. And I am proud to say I have the endorsements of current treasurer Doug Lasher. I also have the endorsement of state auditor Pat McCarthy. And I also have the endorsements of several other county treasurers across the state who've had the opportunity to work with me over the last year and a half, and believe that I would serve the citizens of Clark County very well. So with that, I hope the voters will seriously consider voting for me and electing me to be their treasurer.
Great, well, thank you very much, both of you.
May I
Thank
say
you.
just one thing?
Sure.
I mean, if you judge it by the standard of, okay, who's in the office, who has the insight into how things are currently being run, then the door is more or less effectively closed for people to come in from the private sector into public service. And so I don't know what the threshold is. Do you have to be independently wealthy like Dave Midori or something like that to be able to step into public office? Or can you just amass a great deal of experience, care enough, spend time on volunteer commissions, get involved, and see an opportunity that you're qualified for? I mean, I did not just randomly pick something to jump into public office. We discussed that earlier. So at some point, I think you have to decide what type of government do you want, local government, and should that be open for people to come in from the private sector and have a chance. Now, Alishia just went to the voters just last year. She said she needed to get more done on city council. She asked for another term, and just months later, she's running for county treasurer. I think she's done a good job on city council, but I think if you make a commitment to the voters, and she had your endorsement at the time, then you need to follow through with that, or at least start your term and get going with it before you turn around and start seeking another office. So I hope that, you gentlemen, being representatives of the Fourth Estate here in Clark County, will consider that, and consider that at some point you have to open the door and make local government accessible to outside candidates.
And I'm
Right.
happy to say that I have accomplished the goals that I wanted to in my second term, which is making sure we have a day center, making sure we have replacement funding for the $6 million for additional police, and also making sure that we're going to be funding arts and culture moving forward, which will be in this budget package. So I'm happy to say everything I promised the voters, I have completed.
Great, and with that, we're gonna end it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.